Hey everyone, today's guest is Justin Currie, bassist and lead vocalist for the Glasgow, Scotland alternative rock band, Amitri. Together we break down the writing, recording, and inspiration behind the smash hit, Roll to Me, taken from their 1995 album, Twisted. Justin mentioned that this song was a bit of a curveball for Amitri, and was viewed almost as a throwaway song. It was very different from the rest of the tunes from the same album, and clocked in at only 2 minutes and 12 seconds, whereas the rest of the tracks were significantly longer. It wasn't until he played his girlfriend at the time some demos, and she singled out Roll to Me as the standout track, that Justin thought maybe there was more to this than just a throwaway song. The band had already put together a large following in the UK, and had several hit singles by the time Roll to Me was released, finally breaking big into the US market with the song. I told Justin this song is one of the catchiest earworms that you just can't get out of your head. For all this and a lesson in recording your vocals next to an airfield, don't touch that dial.
Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast. Hey, have you heard? Krista makes a podcast.
Hey Justin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Chris?
I am great. This is an absolute pleasure to be talking to you. You know, I've done a crash course in Amitri the past couple days, and to say that I'm impressed with your story, it would be an understatement. And what a story it is. I had no idea the history of this band, and I'd like to kind of talk about that a little bit. You know, you obviously had the smash hit Roll to Me, which is the song we're going to talk about today. Yeah. And I say smash hit in the United States, but you know, you guys are from Glasgow. You were formed in 1980, and in total, you have 7 albums. 5 of those albums have reached the top 10 in the UK, and globally, the band has sold over 6 million albums. And, you know, there's not many bands that I can think of that started in 1980 with a relative obscurity in the States that 15 years later have this massive hit. So congrats with that. And your history is just, it's kind of crazy here. You know, your first record came out, the self-titled album, in 85. Yeah. And then your next record didn't come out till 89, then 92, and then 95, Twisted came out that features Roll to Me. But that's a pretty big gap between records. What was happening there? Because between 85 and 89, the landscape of music, as you know, completely changed. And again, from 89 to 92, it went through another evolution. So it's really cool that you weathered all those different eras.
What happened to us was we started out as a kind of post-punk, I suppose what you would call in the UK an indie band, which meant we were directly influenced by punk, but we were too young to have been part of the first wave of punk. So really, the stuff we grew up listening to is what you call post-punk. So things like The Fall and Joy Division and Gang of Four, a lot of bands from Manchester. But then what happened was, at the beginning of the 80s, there was a kind of revolution in Glasgow around this independent label called Postcard. And there were 3 really significant groups that had a huge influence on Scottish musicians: Aztec Camera, Orange Juice, and Joseph Kay, all of whom did their own kind of weird version of post-punk guitar music. Very melodic, very clean-sounding guitars. It was kind of like a direct reaction to some of the sort of miserableism that was going on after punk and during post-punk. So Postcard was an extremely hip label, and the bands on the label were extremely hip. And Glasgow had never been a cool town, so that sent thousands of us flooding out of our school classrooms into rehearsal rooms and forming bands, because they kind of showed the way. And they were getting national coverage in the weekly music papers in the UK, and that was a really big deal for us. So that's what we were. We were a post-punk, postcard style band. But then what happened later on is, after the first, the self-titled record came out in 85, we started writing slightly different kind of songs that were a bit more Americana in style. And then we went to America with absolutely no money and slept in fans' houses and on their parents' floors and slept on picnic benches. And that was such a formative experience that it completely changed who we were. So we came back and we started writing kind of like blues and folk songs. We started writing very mainstream sounding songs, which is not where we'd come from at all. And at that point, we thought, well, what the fuck are we going to do about this? Because we're going to lose all of our previous audience, and we're writing these things that sort of sound like pop songs. So eventually, we decided, well, if we're writing pop songs, we should probably go back and try and sign to another major label and try and be a pop band, because we don't sound like an indie band anymore.
Yeah.
So, I mean, effectively what happened to us was we went to America in 1986. And as I say, we didn't have a record company. We didn't have an agent. We just, our manager at the time, Barbara Shores, had just written to fans that had written to us through the fan club and asked them if they'd put a gig on for us. And we just flew over there and stayed in people's houses. It was completely
right.
pretty mad, That just had that really permeated our kind of, partly because these kids that we were meeting were into really different things from like kind of trendy post-punk music. They were into quite mainstream music. That allowed us to kind of relax about what our influences were. So it was, if one of your songs sounded like Tom Petty, that was okay. Whereas in the early 80s, you'd have thrown that song out because it was too mainstream.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you said the term Americana. I would never want to insult a band from Glasgow by saying, but that's what the sound kind of reminded me of, where it went from the first record. I could really hear your accent on the first record. It sounded, okay, these guys are definitely from the UK or Glasgow. But the later stuff, as you said, it was a little more kind of jangly pop. I'll tell you, I did not know your song from your third record, Change Everything, the song Always the Last to Know.
Yeah.
So I'm researching the band, and that came on. I'm telling you, Rock 104 in Gainesville, Florida, where my band is from, where I went to uni, they played the heck out of that song. By the chorus, I'm singing the song going, oh my gosh, I haven't heard this in almost 30 years. What a fantastic track.
I'm the last to know, the last to know how you're feeling, the last to know where you are, the last to know if you're happy now, or if he's treating you like I treated you, or if he's cruel. I'll be the last to know.
Well, that was a kind of minor hit as well in the States. So before Roll to Me went bonkers at pop radio, there was a song called Kiss the Saying Goodbye on Waking Hours, which got quite a bit of radio play, and then Always the Last to Know got quite a bit of radio play. So we were kind of we were sort of doing all right at radio in the early 90s, but we didn't expect to have a pop hit. That wasn't in our plan, and it wasn't in A&M, the record label's plan at all. The record was so fast and so short that the radio stations loved it because they could stick it on before the news. So that's one of the main reasons why it climbed up the pop charts, and one of the main reasons why a rock band like Amitri ended up on CHR radio, which is not somewhere that we would have expected to have been.
Well, and I have to ask, so the song Always the Last to Know, it was 8 on the track listing out of 12 songs on the Change Everything record. And then when I looked at Twisted from 95 that Roll to Me's on, Roll to Me was the 7th track out of 12. Usually you're going to put the hits around maybe position 2, 3, or 4. Did you not know these songs were hits when you wrote them? Were they just other songs in the bunch?
Not really. And also, A&M was a very artist-friendly label with a very sort of understanding A&R department. So if we wanted to sequence an album purely because of the flow of the tracks worked, then the record company weren't going to stick their foot down and say, you need to put the first single up front. And in return for that understanding, we didn't make much of an argument about what the singles were. It was up to them to choose what the singles were. But I mean, we knew that on every record there were 2 or 3 things that were radio friendly enough to get played in the radio, but we never knew anything was going to be a hit. I mean, we thought about not putting Roll to Me on Twisted because Twisted was kind of a grunge influenced album, and Roll to Me being the sort of pure pop that it is, we thought it stuck out like a sore thumb. So we only really ended up putting it on the record because it worked coming after a really long kind of grungy It's like this Sonic Youthy track called Being Somebody Else. So it really ended up on the record just purely for sequencing reasons, not because we thought it was going to be a hit. I mean, if we thought it was going to be a hit, we wouldn't have mixed it like that. I mean, we mixed it with the drums and the bass in one channel and the vocals and guitars in the other channel. I can't remember it, but it's got one of those radical sort of George Martin 60s stereo mixes, which we had to fix when it started getting played in the radio, because we discovered pretty quickly that an awful lot of radio stations are only broadcasting the left side or the right side. So you'd be driving along the freeway between radio stations on promo tours. They go, ladies and gentlemen, or not ladies and gentlemen, this Scottish band are coming in later this afternoon and we're going to play their song Roll to Me. And they play it, and all you would hear, sometimes there'd be no vocals, and sometimes there would be all vocals and drums or something. It was really bizarre.
I am so glad that you addressed this, because I called my producer last night. I'm going, Chris, I'm freaking out. I'm like looking on YouTube. We're looking on Spotify. Sometimes it's in stereo. Sometimes it sounds like it's in mono, like an old, like you said, old George Martin recording where the vocals are panned right, the guitars are panned, and the drums are panned hard left. So I'm glad that you addressed that. I went ahead and we're going to talk about the stereo mix today.
Yeah, fine. I can't remember what exactly is on both sides, but it is pretty radical.
It wasn't just Roll to Me. I went back in your catalog. There's a lot of other songs that you had done like that.
Well, the guy that produced our first album, Hugh Jones, he started in studios in the late 60s, and he had a big thing about panning, where sometimes there was nothing wrong with panning a whole load of stuff hard left and a whole load of stuff hard right. I mean, it's very dangerous when it comes to broadcast, because you just don't know what kind of phasing problems broadcasters have, and you never know whether they're broadcasting both channels, and they never know. And unless it's the BBC, where they've got like a team of highly paid technicians. A lot of these radio stations are run on pretty basic budgets, and they don't have an engineer on call to check every day that they're actually broadcasting what they think they're broadcasting. Anyway, I digress.
No, you're absolutely right. You're making me laugh, because it's so true. Something else I wanted to talk about: your second album, Waking Hours, that came out in '89.
Yeah,
and that was your first on A&M. Previously, you had been on Chrysalis, but you're on A&M after that. But that album, Waking Hours, and 1992's Change Everything, both those albums were mixed by one of my favorite producers, an Englishman named Gil Norton. And then I noticed for Twisted, and again, you had a lot of success with those records in the UK. You changed to a gentleman named Al Clay. He's worked with Hans Zimmer, Frank Black, the Boo Radleys, Pink, Adam Lambert, etc. Why the change to Al Clay for this record?
Well, what happened a lot with us was we would start working with a producer, and then once we kind of knew what we were doing in the studio, sort of round about 87. By about 87, we sort of knew what we were doing. So when we hired Hugh Jones to produce the first 3 tracks on Waking Hours, I say initially when we made Waking Hours, we hired a guy called David Kershenbaum, who produced a whole version of the album that we threw away because it was so awful. Then we hired Hugh Jones to do, who'd done the first album, as I say, to do 3 tracks. And even though they were good, we wanted everything to be a bit looser. So we got talking to his engineer, and then we hired his engineer, and that's kind of what happened with Al Clay, because Al Clay had worked for Gil Norton, and we'd worked with him on I think on a one-off single called "Spit in the Rain."
And you can try to find her, but you'll be looking in vain, because love disappears like spit in the rain.
So we tended to work with producers, and then find that working with established, like proper producers, so people that really get into the nuts and bolts of everything, we found that a little bit limiting, because sometimes we didn't want to sound that smooth or something. So we were sort of constantly looking for the right combination of somebody that could record as well, look at the structures a bit, but not sort of overdo it. So that's why we ended up with Al Clay, because we just thought he was easier to work with than Gil. I mean, Gil's a brilliant producer, but he's not the easiest man in the world to work with. He's very, very, very opinionated, and he likes to win arguments, which is not kind of the way we work,
So I've heard.
Yeah,
I heard he's.
I mean, he's brilliant. I love Gil as a man, and I think he's a brilliant producer. But we found it was just a bit too dictatorial for us. I mean, that being said, he completely rearranged Always the Last to Know, and it wouldn't have been a hit in Europe if he hadn't done that. So I'm eternally grateful for him for doing that. I mean, even though he's worked with all these sort of legendary alternative rock bands, I mean, if you listen to those Pixies records, they're produced in a way that makes them much more accessible than they would have been without that sort of production.
Oh yeah,
I always think of Gil Norton as a sort of classic pop producer. He's they're very toppy. There's lots of hooks on Gil Norton's productions. I listened to Ocean Rain, which was kind of his first big record he engineered, but I think he did quite a lot of production work on it, and that's still an extraordinary record. Echo and the Bunnymen's Ocean Rain.
You're porting my heavy storms, harbors the blackest thoughts.
Well, Roll to Me, once again, is from your fourth album, Twisted, which was released in February of 1995. And Roll to Me, the single, was released June 26, my parents' wedding anniversary, June 26, 1995.
I'm impressed you know your parents' anniversary. I don't even know my own anniversary.
Roll to Me, again, we talked about number 7 out of 12 on the record. And, the next song in length to that, because this song is 2 minutes and 12 seconds, the shortest song on the record. The next one's 3:38. Most songs are 4.5, 5, and you have one song that's 6 minutes and 36 seconds on the record. So I'm amazed that a song 2:12, usually the typical pop radio standards around 3 minutes.
Yeah.
This song, there is no fat on this at all.
The reason it's so short is because it's 142 BPM. It's deceptively fast. So that's why it's so short. I mean, everything's in there. It's got 4 verses. It's got 2 middle eights. It's got a very short instrumental. So it shouldn't be that short. It's just so fast.
Yeah. It's a short one, but man, it is a full song, as you said. And what an earworm. Justin, I typically listen to the songs when I'm, researching them 30, 40 times. And of course, I know this song. I've heard it a million times. I can't get it out of my head. It's just one of those songs. Once it's in there, it's just what an earworm. The song's 2 minutes and 12 seconds. The intro is a single hit on a kick drum and a cymbal crash with a single note of bass and a guitar chord that rings out for 2 bars. Then there's a nice little drum fill that takes us into 4 bars of drums, bass, and is that a 12-string acoustic panned off left?
Yeah, the riff's all played on a 12-string acoustic, which we borrowed off the guy that owned the studio we were in. Yeah, in fact, even though I'm not a guitar player, I played all that and I dropped in nearly every note on an Elisa Seda, because I had the melody in my head, but I couldn't play it. And I just sort of detuned the guitar to try and find a way of playing it easily. I mean, even good guitar players have great difficulty playing that riff. So I basically dropped in every bloody note on it.
No kidding. Well, it sounded like a 12-string, and what a beautiful sound.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
I think it was an old Martin. It was a beautiful guitar.
Well, then it sounds like there's a hook melody that's center that also sounds like a 12-string playing the main riff.
I'm not sure what that would be. There's a bit of electric guitar in there, which sort of confuses the issue. But the riff is all 12-string.
Okay.
But there's a bit of jangly electric guitar that Ian played that kind of holds it all together.
I believe that's panned off right. I said another jangly guitar panned off right. So I think that's the electric that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, again, right off the top, catchy as all get out, and then we set up for verse 1.
Look around your world, pretty baby. Is it everything you hoped it'd be? The wrong guy, the wrong situation, the right time to roll
Well, this is probably one of the most meaningless songs I've ever written, so this might be tough, but on you go. Read it out, and I'll make something up.
Perfect. I love meaningless songs that are massive hits. This is going to be good. Seriously. Because, hey, I've written so many meaningless songs in my life, Justin, but I've never had a huge hit. So, hey, good on you. Look around your world, pretty baby. Is it everything you hoped it'd be? The wrong guy, the wrong situation. The right time to roll to me. Roll to me.
Yeah. This is going to be tough. I mean, I usually write lyrics and melody roughly the same time, but I think with this, I was desperate to write a Paul McCartney-esque thing where the melody covers a big range of notes, which I don't normally do. I normally write much more in that sort of Dylan Lennon mode where you're really within about 4 notes, and you might occasionally sing something a fifth above that or something. So there's pretty much a new chord on every word. So there's a new chord on every sort of syllable and a half. So I think I would have filled in the words after I had the melody. I can't remember specifically, but I was pleased that the melody was McCartney-esque enough that I wasn't that worried about the words. I mean, I still find that Pretty Baby really unbelievably cloying. And also there's no space at all in the verses. It's just there's like a one beat break between all the lines, which is not songwriting. It's just a rush of blood to the head. So that goes against the grain with me as a writer, because sometimes a lot of the time it's the gaps you leave that actually contain the meaning a wee bit. So this drives me mad, and it's also hellish to sing, especially at my age now, because there's nowhere to get a breath. That's all. I
was going to say, and I've talked about that on this show before, Justin, where it's like you write this song, you think it's the greatest thing in the world, and you go play it live and go, uh-oh, as a vocalist.
Yeah,
you're like, where the hell am I going to breathe?
Well, we didn't think this was the greatest thing alive, but what we found amusing about this song was we thought it harked back a bit to the first album that we did on Chrysalis, which is very acoustic driven, lots of acoustic guitar melody, and lots of words in a furious hot heap, as my cousin once said. So that's what we found amusing about it, even though it really didn't fit into what we were doing at the time, where we were trying to be a kind of grungy rock band with pop tunes. I mean, when we were making this album in '94, we were in the studio when Kurt Cobain died, and I'd been listening to Nirvana for a few years by that point, and was, not obsessed with them, but Nirvana were the real deal for me. Man, I really hated grunge, but I absolutely adored Nirvana because they were putting together punk chords with rock drumming and kind of sort of Beatley Lennon-y harmonies, and really great tunes and really spooky fucking lyrics. So Roll to Me was the exact opposite to what we were listening to at the time. We were listening to Swerve Driver and, Mudhoney, and Ian was listening to kind of like southern rock stuff. So it was a complete anomaly, this song. And that's partly why we had a bit of affection for it, because we thought this is going to be light relief on quite a dark sort of record in terms of sonic colours. And we thought this record it'll just inject some brightness in the middle of quite a morose sort of record. So that's kind of why we stuck up for it. I don't think we stuck up for it because we thought it'd be a hit. And if we had thought it was going to be a hit, we might have thought about not putting it on the record and putting it on another record, because at the end of the day, it didn't really do as much good in terms of selling albums or selling tickets, because it was all on pop radio. It wasn't on adult contemporary or college radio or alternative rock radio. It was on pop radio, and nobody knew who we were. The people who listen to pop radio don't go to their local bar to see a touring Scottish rock band.
I thought you were a new band in '95, being from the States. I think that was the perception of probably most people.
Yeah. So it made us a lot of money, but it didn't really break us in the way that people over here in the UK thought it had, because they thought, oh, you've had a top 10 record on Billboard, you must be playing arenas. So no, they're playing to 300 people a night, and nobody, those people know who we are because they probably heard us on college radio in the late 80s, but nobody that's that hears Roll to Me on pop radio has a clue who we are,
right,
or what we do. You know.
So come on, babe, let's kiss this thing goodbye.
Hey everybody, we'll be right back with lots more with Justin Currie after a few words from our sponsors.
Hey, what's up? My name's Lurk, and I'm the host of Lambgoat's Van Flip podcast. Every week I have in-depth conversations with bands from all over the scene, big and small. We also like to keep our finger on the pulse and showcase up-and-coming bands on the show as well. So come check out Lambgoat's Van Flip podcast.
I sometimes feel when we're together, baby, everything has turned out wrong. And I know you.
And now, back to the show.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the Southern rock leanings, because I hear that in here, definitely in the verses. There's something about this, and it makes me chuckle a little bit, you guys being from Glasgow, that I hear that. There's a lot of stuff going on here. I also could make the argument, I think, that at the end of all these verses, because we don't get a traditional chorus in this song,
No.
I think the roll to me's that happen at each end of the verses are almost like a chorus in and of themselves. That's the hook.
Yeah. I'm not very good at writing choruses. I can write middle eights, but I find choruses very difficult. I never quite know what to do on choruses. So a lot of my choruses tend to be the Dylan chorus, where the title is just the playoff at the end of the verse. And that functions as a very short chorus.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying here. And we get harmonies on the first to Roll to Me, which are kind of centered or maybe panned off a little bit, but the second Roll to Me is panned off pretty hard to the left, which I think is really cool. And I love the production here, even though it's not the original idea of completely having stuff panned, but we get that 12-string acoustic, which is panned off left, bass and drums in this verse is kind of going along. And then when the verse turns around, it's a 4-bar reintro, and it sounds almost like an overdub cymbal, like the ride cymbal, like on the bell.
And roll to me, roll to me. And look into.
Yeah, I think we did overdub that. That was a trick we learned from Hugh Jones, which he stole from Penny Lane, where you overdub you close mic the bell of a ride cymbal, and you do it as an overdub, so you can stick it really high in the mix, and it's just got a really atmospheric feel about it. The drummer on this was a session drummer called Chris Sharrock, who's still one of the best drummers in the world. He played on the last There She Goes. He used to play in a band called the Icicle Works when he was a really young man, and he's played with tons of people. And he's got an incredible 60s feel, which is somewhat halfway between Keith Moon, Ringo Starr, and maybe with a bit of John Bonham or something. But so he's neither one thing nor the other. So he's got a bit of swing like Ringo Starr, but he's also got quite a heavy solid feel like Keith Moon or maybe John Bonham. Maybe that's a bad example. Maybe Ginger Baker. So he's got a really amazing combination of sort of 60s feels, which just really works for this kind of music.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear the Ringo and the Ginger Baker in this, and what a feel he has. Well, I love that bell. It's panned slightly left, and then we get into verse 2.
And look into your heart, pretty baby, is it aching with some nameless need? Is there something wrong and you can't put your finger on it? Right then, roll to me.
And I'm going to read these lyrics and have you talk a little bit about these if you can. And you're laughing again.
No, because I completely obfuscated on the first verse, because it's just such an obvious kind of. These lyrics fall into a very specific category of pop song, which is from the 90s, I guess the 20s onwards. I'm in love with you. You're not happy with your partner. I can make you a better offer. That's a really standard trope in pop music. So once you decide you're in that mode, it's sort of a case of joining the dots. So,
well, did you write this about somebody specific? Is it coming from personal?
No, I don't think it did. I don't think it did. I would be honest with you if it was a really autobiographical thing. I literally just fitted the lyrics to the melody. That was the only thing that mattered. So the melody takes precedence over the lyrics, which is not the usual way around for what I do. I tend to sacrifice melody for the getting some intelligence into the lyrics. Whereas in this was the other way around. The lyrics are as dumb as possible just to keep that melody clear, make the melody really clear.
I'm so glad you said that. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
This melody is so strong. It's so catchy that, dare I say, you could have sang the Telephone Book, but you really almost could have here. And I wouldn't have known. You could have told me, yeah, I wrote this about my ex. She broke my heart, or I was trying to win somebody back. But
no, it was just I know what pop trope I'm in. I just need to fill in the syllables, and because it's so fast. I'm sure I'd have gone back to sort of re-edit it and try and improve the lyrics. But because it's so fast, and as I say, there's a chord in every word, it was almost impossible to get anything in there without sacrificing the way the melody scans and the melody itself. So I just had to stick with pretty much what I originally wrote. I don't remember doing much rewriting at all on this.
Do you recall demoing the song?
Yeah, I demoed it at home on my own. And I remember playing it. I had a girlfriend from New York at the time that was over in Scotland, and she heard it and she went, that's really different from everything you're doing at the moment. That's quite interesting. So she was the first person to go, that's got something special about it. Because for me, it was pretty throwaway, and it's quite a common thing that people's most throwaway songs end up being very successful in some fashion or other, either in a film or on radio or something, or they get used as a theme tune or something. So there's nothing wrong with writing throwaway songs. Just don't throw them away.
Yeah, well, something I never talked about on the show was the girlfriend gauge. I can't tell you how many times the girlfriend's like, "That's the song." You're like, "What? That's the throwaway song." What do you hear here? But whether you want to expound on verse 2 or not, Justin, I'm going to read them for the listeners.
Yeah,
and look into your heart, pretty baby. Is it aching with some nameless need? Is there something wrong and you can't put your finger on it? Right then, roll to me. And on roll to me, we get another harmony.
I quite like aching with some nameless need. That's got a lot of good internal rhyming in it. So that's the first line I can sing with any real sort of passion, because I quite like that line. The first verse is just so obvious and straight down the line. And there's a couple of things in the middle eight that have got a wee bit of darkness in them. And aching with some nameless needs got a bit of darkness in it, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd have been quite pleased with that at the time, I think.
What I like about line 2 and 3 here is they're both asking a question.
Yeah.
And I feel times in songwriting when you ask questions, it makes people think, and I guess that could be good or bad, but I like what it's asking here. After this verse, we get into a 2-bar reintro, but this is slightly different. The progression and the riff changes a bit here.
Yeah.
Before we get into what I'm calling bridge number 1.
Yeah. We call it a middle eight, but you guys call it a bridge. Either or.
And I don't think I have ever seen a soul so in despair. So if you want to talk the night through, guess who will be there? So don't.
And I don't think I have ever seen a soul so in despair. So if you want to talk the night through, guess who will be there?
Yeah.
And this could almost be argued that it happens twice. This is kind of like a chorus as well. It's so catchy, but I love the minor chords here and how it really, the whole mood kind of goes a little dark from how poppy these verses were. And there's a lot going on here, but talk a little bit about these lyrics.
This is where it gets a bit more interesting. As you say, it changes to a sort of surprising minor chord at the beginning of the bridge, as you're calling them. Again, a very Beatley thing to do. I probably stole this pretty directly from the Lennon middle eight, and We Can Work It Out, where it goes from major to minor.
We can work it out. We can work it out. Life is very short, and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend.
So that would have been my thinking there. Also, I wrote this in Dagdad, and I'd only just learned a new minor chord in Dagdad, and that's the one I used at the start of the middle eight. But yeah, I remember being really pleased with the chord sequence in the middle eight, because it's kind of a descending chord sequence from the minor. I remember thinking that's quite good. So I think when I wrote that bit, I'd have thought, oh, maybe this song is not a complete dog, you know. But as you pointed out before, at the end of the second verse and before that bridge, there's a little turnaround where the chords are slightly different, and that's what makes songs like this, because the songs like this work because they've got so many chords and they work on a sort of weird internal logic. They're really hard to learn. So I've done this song with other bands before, where the other bands go, "Oh, will you get them to do a version of Roll to Me and we'll play it," and they always make a right mess of it.
I can tell you right now, because when I picked up the guitar, I always go through the songs on here. There's some changes in here that are different that I immediately thought of. How many bar bands screw this up?
Yeah, and there's not really any way of simplifying it, because to get into the middle eight, you need that funny little funny wee turnaround. And actually, to be honest, because we played it to death in the mid-90s when it was running up the charts. We were doing so many gigs and promo things and acoustic shows and radio things, and we never found the right way to play it. Again, partly because the 12-string riff was all dropped together in a really funny tuning, so it's almost impossible to play the riff without really going around the houses and changing tunings and things. So when we did our comeback tour in 2014, and we thought, we've got to play Roll to Me, because we're doing a sort of great set, so we've got to play it. And we rehearsed for 13 days straight, and we only really got it together on the 12th or 13th day. So it's an absolute dog to play, an absolute dog. I mean, we still quite enjoy doing it because it is such a challenge, But
and isn't that funny? Because you have other songs that just seem so much more entailed than this, and this is the one that gives you the headache. It's really interesting. Well, there's some cool things going on here in this middle eight. The guitar is still panned off left, bass and drums are here, and an organ comes in, almost like a B3 on this part. I love that. On the first line and the second line, we get harmonies, but not on the back two, because on the back two, we get these oohs, these backing vocals on line 3 and 4. And at the very end, there's a backing vocal when you say "we'll be there." There's a air that comes. I also love that the tambourine single hits and castanets come in here.
Again, this is just all Beatles. It's just all stuff that we learned from Beatles records, and reading Mark Lewisham's The Beatles Complete Recording Years, and working with guys like Hugh Jones and Gil Norton, especially Hugh Jones, who really understood how those Beatles records were constructed. And percussion's so vital in Beatles records, and it's also really loud. So when we were mixing this with Bob Clearmountain, and we had to kind of ask Bob Clearmountain to mix in a way that he wasn't really used to, so in a very dry way. And then when we asked him to do the Beatles panel, he was totally up for it, actually. But also just turn the percussion up. It's got to be deafening, because it's just got to have real impact. It's not part of the kit. It's kind of part of the lead riff, So the castanets. That was our friend Dave McCluskey from a band called the Bluebells that came in, and he played the castanets by virtue of being the only person we knew who had a pair of castanets.
It's not like that common of an instrument. Why I love the placement here. The tambourine is on the word have in the first line. Castanets come after the word seen. The second line, it's on despair, and after despair, the castanets come in. I just love the placement where you have it here. And I have to ask, I hear obviously the organ in this part. Yeah. I don't hear the organ anywhere else in the song.
No, we didn't want any keyboards in the song, but there was just a bit of a sonic gap between the acoustic and the electric. We thought there was something that could sort of fill that space, and we wanted something. I think we were trying to go for a Vox Continentally sort of sound, but we didn't. I don't think we had one, so we'd have aped it on a Roland sort of Hammond copy. Mm-hmm. This is one of these songs, again, because it was so redolent of what we did in the first album when we didn't have a keyboard player. I mean, there's a bit of piano, a bit of organ in the first album, but everything's done on guitars in the first album. So we didn't really hear a place for electric piano or clavinet or anything. So I guess just to give Andy Austin, our keyboard player, a go, we thought, you can play in the middle eight.
We're gonna throw you a bone here, pal. Here's where you get to play. You can come behind the stage curtain for 8 bars here. I love that though. I love that this whole section, it's just a completely different mood. And after those backing vocals come in, the air, we get into verse 3.
So don't try to deny it, pretty baby, you can hardly see. When the engines stall and it won't stop raining, it's the right time to roll to me. Roll to me. Roll to me.
So don't try to deny it, pretty baby. You've been down so long you can hardly see. When the engine's stalled and it won't stop raining, it's the right time to roll to me. Roll to me, roll to me. On the first roll to me, we get that centered harmony. The second and third roll to me's, they're panned off left on bar 2 and 4. And I say bar 2 and 4 because the main riff after the first roll to me, that guitar hook, it comes back, but it changes again here for 8 bars. I love it.
Yeah, I think because I was playing that part and I'm not a guitar player, I was trying to sort of make it a solo, but just keep it in the same mode as the riff. So I ended up just alternating the melody a bit, like just modulating it up on the third phrase or something, I think. Again, which is sort of really, I was desperately trying to stay in that Beatles mode. I mean, if you think of everything prior to maybe Abbey Road, and certainly prior to Sgt. Pepper, the lead guitar playing is very thematic. It's not virtuoso ostentation. It's not showing off. It's not jazzy. It's very thematic and it's very melodic. Because what I could have done with that instrumental section is just ask one of the 2 guitar players to play a solo. But I just didn't feel that was right. I just wanted to stay in that really heavily structured melodic mode. So yeah, I just modulated up the middle bit to make it mildly more interesting and just make it more difficult for the guitar player when he had to play it live.
Well, I kind of feel in some ways you're kind of downplaying this song. I'm telling you, what appears to be this simple little pop song, there's a lot here. It's not, as you said, you've how many bands have you heard that have just they butcher this because there is these little turnarounds. That little part you do here, what you're calling the solo, it's great.
It is fiendishly complicated, but it doesn't, because it's all based on tunes, it doesn't sound to your ear like it's overwrought or ridiculously complicated, which is, that can only be a good thing. I mean, we've thrown many a song away which just feels you have to overwork the changes and the turnarounds to get it to sort of structurally hand together. Whereas this one, there's a good musical reason every time there's a slightly different sequence. There was something in my head telling me, no, this makes sense melodically and it's not going to jar on the ear.
I'll tell you what I like when the second middle 8 comes in here, or bridge number 2 as we call it. It's the same lyric and music as the first time that it happens. Was there ever a thought, hey, maybe we got to change this one up, or was it always the same?
Normally, when we would hit this stage of the song, we would bring in a new element. We'd bring in maybe piano or something.
Yes.
Or like a high Hammond or something like that. But again, this is just harking back to the Beatles. Quite a lot of Beatles songs have 2 middle 8s either side of a chorus or either side of an instrumental. So you get a middle 8, instrumental, repeated middle 8. And they were always the same. They were always the same words and the same arrangement. So that's kind of why we stuck to that. We didn't feel like it had to go anywhere else. Yes, we're just sort of religiously following what the Beatles did.
Well, I'm assuming you did this to 2-inch tape. This wasn't to Pro Tools in 95,
no,
94.
It's all
so yeah,
2-inch.
and this second middle 8 almost sounds identical. I'm wondering if Bob Clearmountain, it sounds like the organ is maybe a dB and a half louder or something, and maybe even one of the jangly guitars seems a little bit louder. Other than that, it's pretty much a carbon copy of the first time.
Yeah, as I remember, it's certainly exactly the same arrangement. Yeah, I mean, Bob's a very clever dude. He may well have poked something up.
Okay.
To give it, so it feels like the song's progressing. But again, we didn't feel the necessity to bring anything else in because we were only like a minute and a half into the song at this point.
I know. It's crazy. And coming right out of this second middle 8, we go into verse 4, which is essentially an outro of the song.
So look around. the right time to roll to me, the right time to roll to me, the right time to roll to me.
So look around your world, pretty baby. Is it everything you hoped it'd be? The wrong guy, the wrong situation. The right time to roll to me. The right time to roll to me. The right time to roll to me. And then we get an ooh vocal, a lush harmony vocal on the oohs there. On the first two lines here, it's just kick, snare, and that 12-string acoustic panned off left. After the second line, the bass comes back in here on line 2. The bass gets kind of funky here. I like it. And here's the part that's great. And again, I would bet when you get up with bands, this is the part they mess up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
when
difficult.
we get to when we get to the 3 roll to me's here at the end, it's a very strange, but these cool little hiccups that are happening.
Yeah.
It's a really cool turnaround on these 3 lines, and it took me probably again, I've heard this song numerous times, but when I sat down to analyze it, that's when it hit me like, okay, what's going on here? It's really cool.
Yeah, it's a tricky little thing that made total sense to me when I was writing the song. Especially in Baghdad for some reason. But I do remember when I was playing the bass to it with our drummer, that being tricky in terms of where do we put the kick drum and do we leave a gap and all that sort of stuff. And again, that's something that Chris Sharrock really sorted out. So the part that Chris Sharrock nailed really, really works there, because you could have overworked those little hiccups and done some kind of stop beats, and it would have just been too clever. Chris managed to find a way of sort of playing through it and getting a fill in at the end, I think. So, thanks to Chris Sharrock on that one.
It's awesome. And for the listeners, you mentioned it again. You mentioned Dadgad. And
Yeah.
Dadgad, he was saying he writes in Dadgad. Typically, a standard guitar is tuned E, A, D, G, B, back to the high E. In this instance, the low string is tuned to D instead of E. So that's what he's referencing there.
And the top 2 strings go down a tone as well. The top E goes down to a D and the B goes down to an A.
That turnaround there, that's just so cool. And right at the last roll to me, the band stops and they ring out, and that's when those oohs come in.
Yeah.
And then again here, it's like the drum fill comes in, and then it's like 1.5 bars. It's not like a full 2 bars. It's a weird thing at the end. And then the band ends together, ringing out bass, guitars, and cymbals on the fade out. The last few seconds, it almost sounds like an airplane swirling right and left.
It is an airplane.
It is.
Because I used to, by this stage, I recorded all my own vocals in the bedroom of whatever residential recording studio we were in. So I would let the producer or engineer get on with recording band overdubs, and I would do vocals. It made things a lot quicker, and I would do my own vocal comps, and we would just take them off an ADAT and stick them back onto the 2-inch. But my bedroom faced the front of the building, and we were in the middle of Lincolnshire, and there's a lot of US Army bases in Lincolnshire. So it would have been a jet taking off from one of those army bases, or Air Force bases, I should say. And we just kept it in because it just sounded really nice in the headphones.
That is so awesome. I thought it was something you overdubbed for sure. That I didn't think that was just on a take.
It's on the vocal track, so we just kept it.
That is great. That is that's really cool. It's those little accidents that happen sometimes we leave in that makes it special.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, this song is great, and I really want to thank you for taking the time to break it down. And I got to tell you, you have a new song, relatively new, from 2021. It's called "You Can't Go Back." I checked that out, and I checked out the video, which is a parody of the original video. Roll to Me. It is awesome. So for the listeners, check that out. It's so cool. And what do you got coming up with the band? What's going on?
Well, we've got a live DVD coming out of a show we did at Glasgow Barland Ballroom. So we're doing a little showing of that in the local art house theatre here in December. And then we're off to Australia in February, and we're hoping to be back touring the States in the summer.
Well, much continued success, Justin, and thank you so much for sitting in today. I really appreciate it.
Chris, thank you so much for your incredibly specific and detailed analysis. That was a pleasure.
You can't go back. You can't go back. Yeah. That thing between us that we knew was something special, and it seems it still is. You can't go.
I hope you all enjoyed that conversation with Justin Currie, and man, Amitri is a really good band. That song you were just hearing is their 2021 single, You Can't Go Back, which is the one Chris just mentioned with the music video that was kind of a parody of Roll to Me. So go check that out and dive into their whole back catalog if you're not familiar with it, because I'm pretty confident you're going to find a lot of songs that you like. Listen, we got to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors, but don't go anywhere. There's lots more Chris DeMakes a Podcast after the break.
Hey, this is Mike Wiebe, and I'm the singer in a band called the Riverboat Gamblers.
And I'm Zach Blair. I play guitar in a band called Rise Against. Mike and I also have a band called the Draculas, and we also have this great, amazing new podcast called Zach and Mike Make 3.
Yeah, each week we're going to ask ourselves and we're going to ask our guests what 3 favorite things they are into at that moment or in their entire lives. And then we're either going to agree with them or we're going to make fun of them. And you're going to listen to it and you're going to like it, or we will make fun of you. How about that? I just flipped it on you, the person listening to this right now. But we're going to do it every week here on the Sound Talent Network. Once again, it's called Zach and Mike Make 3.
Yeah.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know. If you'd like your band to be considered for Chris DeMakes a Podcast, all you have to do is email your best song via MP3 only and a short bio to bandyoumightnotknow@gmail.com. This week's featured artist is Upchuck, a 5-piece band from Atlanta, Georgia, formed from connections made in skateboarding, construction, and teenage delinquency. The band consists of Mike on lead guitar, Hoff on rhythm guitar, Armando on bass, Chris on drums, and KT on vocals. Here's a snippet of their song, Our Skin.
The Wrap with Chris and Chris.
There's nothing wrong with writing a throwaway song. Just don't throw it away. I thought that was an amazing quote, and what good advice. And, you know, Justin kind of thought of this song as almost a throwaway song. Imagine if he would have thrown away this giant hit.
I know, it's so crazy. And his girlfriend, she was someone that talked a little sensitive, said, no, there's something really really special here. But yeah, the song really stuck out to me. Like I said, it was, buried 7th on the record. It's 2 minutes and 12 seconds. But to Justin's point, the song is peppy. It's moving. They packed in a lot in 2 minutes and 12 seconds.
I never really thought about how fast the song is. It is a fast song. Everything about it is. The melody's fast. The music is. And I also never really thought about how Beatle-y this is in a way. Like with 90s production, but elements of those early Beatles songs. I mean, the melodies, everything, he compared the melody to being, he was trying to write like a Paul McCartney melody where he hits a lot of notes. I thought that was interesting because I never put that together, but now I'm like, yeah, obviously. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I loved learning about the history of the band because, again, they were formed in 80. Sounds like they were just kind of kicking around as a pub band, playing in the bars in Scotland. First record came out in 85 on a major, but they were releasing albums pretty infrequently, 85, 89, 92, and then 95. But, as I said to Justin, they sounded to me like they were a brand new band. I had not heard of them. Unbeknownst to me, I had heard of them. I heard the song Always the Last to Know. I didn't know it was them, but when they came out, this song just is so 90s sounding to me. It doesn't sound like they'd have a 15-year history as a band, and I think that, kind of goes to show where their influences were. They were writing from a place that they weren't trying to trend hop. It just so happened this song sounds 90, but yeah, there is a lot of pop Beatles elements in this, especially in those bridge parts.
And he touched on the song being on pop radio, and he kind of talked about how that didn't really translate necessarily to live. Yeah, they were making money because the song was huge, but it didn't necessarily translate the way that it would if it was a band that was huge on rock or college radio or something at that moment. And dude, I can speak from honest experience. I was a 14, 15-year-old kid at this time, and I was too cool for anything on the radio, especially pop radio. But now I look back at this song, I'm like, I love this song. This song's amazing. And it just goes to show that things don't always translate. If just because you're huge at radio doesn't mean, whatever. But this band is obviously huge otherwise. I mean, like you said, they sold 6 million albums. They've had like 10 hits in the UK. But to some of us who don't know a lot about them, they're that band that sings Roll to Me, which, once again, I do love this song.
Well, yeah, and I've had to explain people with my career for Less Than Jake. We'll play to a festival wherever, somewhere in Europe, and it'll just be like 50,000 people losing their minds. And logic would dictate the next time we come back that, oh, hey, there was 50,000 people there. We should sell out a 1,500-seat venue, and, there's like 600 people there that night, which is still good. We go out, have a great show, but you're like, whoa, it doesn't translate, and radio's definitely like that. And here's a band that had been around for 15 years, had enormous success in the UK, come over to the States. Those first tours, he said, were just sleeping on floors. They weren't making any money at all.
To be honest, I was a little bit nervous about this one just because I had read a few places that they were kind of like not crazy about the song or something. And he did communicate a little bit of that, especially when he started reading the lyrics. He was like, these lyrics don't mean anything. But what I did think was really cool and I love is he said the melody takes precedence over the lyrics. He was saying like the lyrics are as dumb as possible to keep the melody what it is. The melody is what's important. And Chris, I love great lyrics. Don't get me wrong, but I'm a melody guy. I love a great melody, and you could take away whatever meaning you want from the lyrics that are there just because he put something in there to secure that melody in there doesn't mean that you can't take a meaning away from it.
Well, that's true. And he even said it was really difficult when he got out to start singing this song. There is no breaths in it as a singer. The line, is there something wrong? And then later in the song, when the engine stalled, like he's spitting that out. He could almost not get that lyric out. And that's the charm of this song and the charm of that melody. I'm glad he brought that up. That was important because we don't address that too much. It's usually, we're reading the lyrics, we're really dissecting them and getting into it. But sometimes the lyric is secondary, and I think that's this song.
And it was funny, too, that he brought it up before you even brought it up. You and I going crazy, calling each other, trying to figure out, like, what's going on here? There's like different mixes of this song. There's a mono mix. There's a stereo mix. Which one should we talk about? Of course, we went with the stereo mix. But it's funny how he told that story about the song getting played on the radio with the other mix. And they'd be like, oh, here's Amitri. And you weren't hearing things. You weren't either the whole vocal was missing. It depended on, I guess, what side would come through. But I've had that happen before where I was playing music through a PA and whatever, if it was a song that was mixed like that, if for one reason or another, I'm like, why am I not hearing the bass in this song? Why does this sound so weird,
Yeah, and a lot of times you'll be at the barber shop or you'll be in an elevator or something, and their PA system is in mono. And Van Halen and AC/DC come to mind. Eddie's guitar in those early Van Halen records was always panned hard right, or hard left, one of the two. And so you'd be listening in mono, and you're like, wait a second, I can hear the bass, I can hear the drums, where's the guitar? And then finally the guitar will come in later, when stereos come in or something. But I always marveled at that. And yeah, you and I last time sitting there going, what is going on? And Justin even said they finally had to do a stereo mix for pop radio, for radio.
And Chris, I was glad, hopefully not the last, but our first Scottish guest. Chris DeMakes a podcast. We are going worldwide, baby.
I hope so. And speaking of going worldwide, you can help us go worldwide by going over to chrisdemakes.com and joining our supporting cast, which is pretty much our version of Patreon. You can join for the low price of $5 or $10 a month, kind of like buying Chris and I a beer or a cup of coffee. And help us out. You get bonus episodes of the after party, and you're supporting the podcast you know and love.
They call me Mr. Worldwide, actually.
They do?
No.
Who's they?
No, that's Pitbull, actually. They call Pitbull Mr. Worldwide. We got to get Pitbull on the show, maybe.
There you go.
Anyway, yes, the Chris DeMakes a podcast supporting cast at chrisdemakes.com is an awesome way to support this show if you love what we're doing, and we really appreciate it. And even if you don't, which I hope you do, but even if you don't, just spreading the word, telling your friends, telling your family, anyone you know who loves music, letting them know about the podcast, that goes a long way. And seriously, I know we always say this stuff at the end of the podcast, but it really means a lot to us because we love doing this.
Absolutely. Thanks to each and every one of you listeners for spreading the word about the show. Without you, we couldn't do this and we wouldn't do this. So thank you so much. If you haven't already, please join the Chris DeMakes a Podcast Facebook group. With over 4,500 members and counting, it's a great place to interact before the show, during the show, after the show, or whenever. So head over there and please join if you haven't, and give me a follow on Instagram at @LessThanChrisD. Want to thank this week's guest, Justin Currie, for sitting in with us, and we'll see you next week.
Do you enjoy the content and production of Chris DeMakes a Podcast? Do you have an idea for a podcast or an existing podcast that you'd like to take to the next level? Well, check out WeKnowPodcasting.com. At WeKnowPodcasting.com, we have over 25 years of combined experience in the pod field, and we're ready to help you succeed in the golden era of podcasting.
Hey everyone, this is Tuck from Fit for a King, an off-road minivan. Every week I bring you fun interviews alongside your favorite metalcore entertainers with my new podcast, Get Tucked. Join me every Monday with bands like Counterparts, Crystal Lake, like Moths to Flames, and many more. We play unsigned and undiscovered bands, deep dive into each artist's history, and of course provide the greatest breakdowns in current metalcore. Tune in to Get Tucked every Monday, out now through Sound Talent Media.
Hey, what's up? This is Blake Weiland. I'm the host of the Tone Mob Podcast. It's a show where I interview guitar people about guitar stuff. We talk about their pedals, their amps, their accessories, their preferences, all that stuff, as well as a healthy dose of whatever comes up. Topics have ranged from aliens to addiction and anywhere in between. Oh yeah, and pizza. We're definitely going to be talking about pizza. So get the show wherever you're listening to this podcast at. Just search The Tone Mob in your search bar and it will pop right up. Come join us. We're having a lot of fun. Thanks for checking it out.